what would you define your core values that kind of guide this, and where'd you learn that?
I learned it from my dad. I start with the premise that all children are born perfect and the grown-ups mess them up. And in some cases we can remediate that if we are clever about it. More?
Well, no, but is there a story? Because people remember stories, and I am the Barbara Walters of Heartfelt, so what do you want? But can you share some stories growing up that caused you to feel for these for the ill and for the forgotten?
It's interesting because it resonates everything that was discussed this morning. My life pivoted in 1983, which God help me is 30 years ago. I met a seriously ill 11-year-old boy whose great wish in life was to go to Disneyland, which was a little challenging because he was in a hospital bed dying of a brain tumor in London. And my cousin and I asked him what would make him happy. He said Disneyland. The doctor said, this child is going to die in a few months. If you think you can get him to Los Angeles, why don't you talk to the mum? So we talked to the mum. The mum said that would be lovely. So we flew the mum and the little boy, couldn't get them into a hotel, so he and the mum and the cousin moved into it was back when I was single. Everybody moved into my apartment. We had an extraordinary 2 weeks. None of that was the pivot, none of that was the epiphany, none of that was the turning point. Turning point was emotion-based. Sean went back to London and he died about maybe 2 months later after he went back. And I had a business lunch with a commissioning editor from HBO, a man called Steve Youlaki. And I tried to sell him some damn project which he didn't buy, and we were still only on the salad. And he asked me probably the most important question I've ever been asked. He said, so what else is new and exciting in your life? And Sean had just died, and it was very much in my mind and in my heart. And I told Steve Youlaki, businessman in a suit and tie, I told him the story. And God bless his soul, Steve Youlaki cried. I mean, he broke down and cried in the Regency Club business restaurant, West Los Angeles. And, you know, men are idiots. Confronted with someone crying, do you hug? What do you do? Put your arm around their shoulders. So, I mean, I hugged him. The waiter was embarrassed. Steve was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. People on the next table couldn't believe what was going on. And when we parted company, he went off to the men's room to kind of recover. And I remember going down in the elevator and saying, I'll be damned. This is very, very powerful. One thing you know as a film producer is if you can pitch someone something and they cry, that probably means there's a film there. So I thought, maybe there's a charity there. And I called a meeting of a dozen people and I said, look, this is what just happened. And we did this wish for this little boy, and maybe we could do it again. I don't really know anything about it. And that was the first meeting of the Starlight Children's Foundation. And here we are, it's 30 years later, 50 million children served, $1 billion, 52 offices, amazing number of people involved in it. But all started with that little emotional moment. So what was being said here this morning about, you know, emotion, heart, yeah, you can build great big structures based on a moment of emotion, which you then present to other people. The most dangerous time in an organization is between idea and not just the wheels are off, the training wheels, but also the bicycle stays upright and it pedals itself. And once you've done one of those and it worked, then you maybe do another one and then you say, hey, well, that one worked too. And they don't all work, and failure is also important. But, you know, that's how you start things. And that's what I've had the honor, the privilege, the delight to set fire to. I'm the spark plug and the get it moving. And then thousands of other people come in and say, yeah, we can do that.
So where did you learn your values?
I got a job in a hospital when I was 18 years old in New York, upstate New York, just because I wanted a job. And it's cold in New York, and hospitals are warm, so I was really just kind of looking out for myself and saw this job inside, and they hired me. I had a ponytail, I was kind of in the 60s generation, and I went in there and I saw all these people in such pain and agony I couldn't understand. I knew nothing about mental illness or addiction. I didn't even know why they were there, and guys would come in there and I go, dude, what's the matter with you, man? Get out of here. This place is for nuts. Get out of here. And they'd be so upset, and finally I started to say, this is real suffering. They don't have a choice. And it just intrigued me, and I had nothing to offer. I had no education. I didn't know what they were going through. But I just started emotionally getting attached to them. Like, people would be waiting for me to come on a 3 to 11 shift just because we'd play checkers and have fun, and I tried to make it an up experience. That's all I had to offer, is my own spirit. And it seemed to touch a lot of people. The story Mark was telling you is, I was working in the hospital, and we did have this woman who came back from the Menninger Foundation, which is one of the biggest hospitals in the world. It's in Texas now. It was in Topeka, Kansas at the time. And this woman had been locked up for 7 years, and she was only about 28. I was about the same age at the time. I'd been working in these locked units for about 8 or 9 years. And this girl came in, and she didn't relate to anyone, and she'd go in and out and in and out. And I told the doctor, why don't you help her stabilize out of the hospital? And he said, I'm trying. He had actually 24-hour staff with this girl, but they were students, and they were fighting over who would be off on the weekend, not how to take care of her. And again, I only had 8 years of experience working as a psych tech, but I knew I could do a better job, and had done a lot of entrepreneurial things before I even knew about psychiatry, so I sort of had that flair about me. So he said, write a proposal, what do you think? And so I picked the best people that I worked with, just 2 other guys and 1 girl, and the 4 of us took this patient on full time. She had a house and a housekeeper, and she got better. After being in the best hospital in the country for 7 years, she was with us for about 1.5 years, and she was back working at her family's company. She was driving to my house and picking me up in the morning because it was our day to spend together, and would virtually spend 12 hours a day with her. Well, the Menninger people said, what the heck's going on? Who is this guy? And the mother kept saying, well, Pete and his little group helped her get better. So they said, we have someone else for you. So then the light went off. They said, wait a second. There's probably more people that could use this. So I go out to Menninger's, and I'll never forget, it was December 16th. And I met this guy, and he was asked to leave because he had started a fire. And that was very scary to them. And he told me he was fooling around. I don't think he was a pyromaniac or really a dangerous guy, but he had come up against a system that couldn't tolerate him. So I told him, I explained what we'd do, and I actually stayed there for a couple of days because I wanted to be sure I knew this guy before I just brought him back to California. And we hit it off pretty well, and he said, the last thing he said to me is, dude, I'll go if you get me out by Christmas. Now it's the 18th, right? And I go, okay, let me see what I can do. So I flew back home, I talked to everybody, and they said, let's do it. And I flew back on the 23rd, and we flew back here to California and had Christmas together. Well, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it seemed like I helped those 2 people. I took that kid back to his family. They lived in Wisconsin, and I think it was the following year I took him back so he could have Christmas with his family. And the mother pulled me aside and said to me, I have my son back. And I'm sorry. When you hear someone say that, it's just amazing. It's just, there's nothing like it. And mental illness is like throwing a hand grenade into a family. It just blows everybody up. And everybody's torn and tattered, and they don't know what to do. And, I found a way to get to these kids and bring them together and then bring the family back together. And I can't tell you how many parents have told me that. And I live for it. There's nothing better than seeing a family reunite.
How have you been able to stay true to those values in a world that doesn't care so much?
I think the world actually does care. I dispute the premise. I think that it is very rare, not nobody, but it is very rare that I encounter someone who has no soul at all. Some film agents, I think, don't really much for soul. A few studio executives, a couple of actors, but generally speaking, if you have a story to tell, and especially I should think in this 1 month period at UCLA, I would say I've had 50 visitors, potential donors, potential volunteers, potential partners, and so forth. They just meet the kids. I don't even sit with them at dinner. The kids just talk to them about their hopes and their dreams, and the grown-ups come out and say, how can I help you? I think there is good in most people, and if you have a story to tell and some examples, it's the pathway that most people don't have. They would like to do good, and they actually don't know how, but if you say, come over here, help us with this, they'll so happily bring enormous value to your program.
So how do we translate what we're hearing from you into drawing those people in who are running our companies to make them as passionate about caring about their employees and their customers?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I agree with what Peter said, though, that I think the world is becoming a much more caring place. And I think this is evidence of it. When Mark started telling me about heartfelt leadership, I instantly said, there's another one. Because there's a lot of organizations, and you know, I've been doing this 37 years, and people are coming out of the woodwork, very, very well-established, wealthy people, and they're not trying to make money. They come to me and say, how can we help you do this? I mean, trying to put this life adjustment team in every city, that's a little grandiose, I got to tell you. I even know that. They talk. But it's got to happen. And the people coming to me have made their money in business, and they know how to do it, and that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in how can we take money and help more people. Of course you have to make money to stay in business. But I've had more people come to me, some of them are even here today, and tell me, what do we need to do to solve this problem? I mean, we know how to get people stable. We can get drug addicts stable in a month to 3 months. We get most people stable with a mental illness. But we can't keep them that way. So how do we keep them that way? And that's what we're pulling together a lot of people that do care, that are willing to put their heart and soul on the line and their checkbook and make it happen. And how do we do that in the corporate world? How do we get it across? I think we have to identify the pain and the fear that will be eliminated by doing it.
Yes, I think that's very astute. You do better by selling happy as a solution to the misery. If you simply say, foster care is shit, these kids are in such a bad place, could you please give us some money? You don't get anything. What you have to do is to say, these are ambitious kids, and with a little help, they can become productive, happy citizens who will have healthy children of their own and will break the cycle and so forth. You have to find the happy within the bad. Those who work in companies, I think there are two ways that you can exercise your heartfelt leadership, internal and external. External is go volunteer. You have amazing executive skills. The 501c3s of America cry out for volunteer people who actually know how to run things and do marketing and accountancy and sales and all the rest of it. They'll bite your arm off. I say to young people, go volunteer. You'll be a vice president in about 15 minutes. You know, anyone brave enough put their head above the parapet and say, I have an idea. Immediately, the charity says, oh, great, you can be executive vice president in charge of the new idea. What do you need? And then internally, within someone's company, I think there are some lost causes. There are certainly people who don't have a soul, and you won't get anywhere. I think you have to just sort of look among your colleagues and see who might possibly agree with you and do a little project, a kind of little under your blotter, something maybe with staff members. And at a certain point, the C-suite will recognize, wow, they seem to be more loyal to our company because they do this extracurricular stuff. You know, every time we all get on American Airlines, we all read about what their staff does pro-socially. I think it's really good for American Airlines, isn't it? I mean, airlines people leave every 6 months and go and get a better offer somewhere else. People stay at American because they think that it's called Miles for Kids in Need. They think that's really powerful, and they're proud to help implement it. And then you say to the marketing and the salespeople, Gen Y, They want pro-social in their products and services. That's how you'll sell more of them. And they test it, they market test it, and it's the truth. And then they do more of it.
I have one thought about that, Dr. Mark, and that is what we've been doing already. You told me about it, and I embraced it. And I've told a lot of people, they didn't have to convince. I just said, this is available, it's a cool thing, do you like it? And they're signing on. You got 850 people, and that's how they all came, right? Somebody told somebody. But I think something that Peter said before is when you stoop down to take a child's hand, well, when you do a kind deed that no one knows about, it's 10 times more powerful. And what she said is she was a fairly young, new employee, and she saw another employee in distress and said, you should go home. And realized she didn't have the authority to tell her to go home, and she was kind of putting herself on the line for this employee. And then when she had to explain to her supervisor, her final comment was, if that was me, I would have wanted someone to tell me to go home. And I said, well, what did your supervisor say? And the response I got was, they understood. I'm not sure if they liked it, but they understood. And I think that those little heroic moments are what's going to change everything. Mess it up, but I think doing the small things to people that it's easy to do, and then keep moving it to a higher and higher stake. Because once you start doing things for people and you see the benefit of it, you'll take more risk and more risk. And when people see you do it, they'll see you grow and develop, and they'll want to be like you. And when they want to be like you, you tell them how you do it. I'm a giver. I'm heartfelt. That's the way that the world's going. We could call it the age of enlightenment. I mean, we've heard all sorts of things about that. The age of Aquarius. Things are changing. I think that's what this heartfelt thing is about. I think consciousness of the whole planet. I mean, you can't smoke in Santa Monica. You know, that's unusual. If you've been around a while, that's really unusual that cities you can't smoke in, you can't smoke at the beach. That's a consciousness, a social consciousness that's raising. So I think if each individual, makes a habit of saying, how can I pay forward my good fortune? Every day in little ways without being found out, it will accumulate to a massive movement.